Hey, how's it going? So the other day, Ashley and I took a trip for the 4th of July to Huntsville, Texas, where she's from. Huntsville is a small city out in the middle of nowhere, Texas, where the largest employer in town is the Texas Department of Criminal Justice. Huntsville is home to several prisons that are scattered throughout town, including the Walls Unit, where nearly 40% of America's executions take place. While just down the road from the Walls Unit and its execution chamber is the city's second largest employer, Sam Houston State University, a nice little college that is the third oldest public university in Texas. It seems to me somewhat of a contradiction that these two things should coexist so closely, but there they sit, right next to each other. One of my favorite things about Huntsville is that in this place in the middle of nowhere stands the 6th largest statue in the United States, a towering portrayal of Sam Houston as a statesman in his later years, watching over the town he would make his home and place he would eventually die. Sam Houston was a really interesting guy, and I also think he's a really good lens for understanding the American frontier, and also the American South in the first half of the 19th century. I mean, when he was 16 years old, he ran away from home to go live with the Cherokee for a few years. It doesn't get much more frontier than that. Later in life, he became the governor of Tennessee, thanks in part to the support of his populist fellow Tennessean pal, President Andrew Jackson. Although they were friends, Houston and Jackson had widely differing opinions about the proper treatment of Native Americans. After Jackson passed his infamous Indian Removal Act, sending Houston's beloved Cherokee and others on the Trail of Tears, Houston went to Washington to expose government frauds committed against the Cherokee. A futile effort. His political career seemingly over, Houston moved to the Mexican territory of Coahuila y Tejas, where he became involved in the Texas independence movement, and was selected as the commander-in-chief of the Texian army. Houston helped level the odds against the superior Mexican army by making promises to the local Native American tribes, saying that their land would be protected in an independent Texas, should they remain neutral during the war, which they did. So then, bada bing, a lot of young people get their brains blown out at the Battle of San Jacinto, and suddenly there is an independent Republic of Texas, with Sam Houston as its first president. Houston spent his first term vying for annexation by the United States, and upheld his promises to the Native American tribes, despite pressure from many Texans who coveted fertile native lands in East Texas. Following a rebellion involving many Native American groups led by Vicente Cordova, public opinion in Texas strongly favored the destruction of the Texas tribes, but instead Houston issued a blanket pardon to all Native Americans involved. He spent his term trying to protect Native tribes, and in particular the Texas Cherokee, but when his term came to an end, Houston was succeeded by Mirabeau Lamar, who was openly hostile to the Native Americans and began, in his own words, quote, "an exterminating war upon their warriors, which will admit no compromise and have no termination, except in their total extinction or total expulsion." And that's exactly what he did, for which he was rewarded with a street named after him in the city that I live. When I drive on Lamar Street, I can't help but think about the blood soaked into the dirt below, now paved over with asphalt. Following Lamar's term, Sam Houston was re-elected as president, becoming the first and third president of the Republic. Too late to save his Cherokee friends who had been removed from Texas by force. You may not have heard, but Texas did eventually join the United States, becoming its 28th state, at which point good old Sam Houston was one of its original 2 senators. At the time, Houston was even considered a potential candidate for President of the United States, but all of that went away when he came out in favor of the Compromise of 1850 and against the Kansas-Nebraska Act, which greatly alienated him with Southern slave owners and most Texans. During this period of rising sectionalism in the country that would eventually lead to the Civil War, Houston emerged as one of the South's few staunch Unionists and opposed the expansion of slavery to the western states. Houston's relationship to slavery is complicated, as he opposed the expansion of slavery, but did himself own slaves. By all accounts, he was relatively kind to his slaves, teaching them to read and write and allowing them to keep some of their earnings. In fact, one of them, named Joshua Houston, eventually took Sam Houston's name when he got his freedom and went on to become a statesman in his own right and remained fond of Sam Houston and his family. Still, I don't tend to award many ethics bonus points for relative kindness when the horror of slavery is involved, and Sam Houston did make comments in support of slavery where it already existed. While Houston's stance on slavery story is complicated and nuanced, his support for the Union of the United States never wavered. When the Civil War broke out in 1861, Sam Houston, ever talented at getting elected, was then the governor of Texas. The Texas legislature voted to secede from the Union and join the Confederacy, but Sam Houston refused to swear allegiance to the Confederacy and was removed from office, convinced his beloved Texas was entering into a folly from which it might never recover. In 1862, out of office and demoralized, Houston returned to the small town of Huntsville, Texas, where he rented this home called the Steamboat House, and died a year later, never seeing Texas restored to the Union. 132 years later, this overlarge statue of him was built. The statue is called A Tribute to Courage, and I think that's fitting. We can choose to remember Sam Houston as a slave-owning, slavery apologist who fought a needless, bloody war to steal land from Mexico. Or we can choose to remember him for his courage in defending the Native American tribes of Texas and fighting against the expansion of slavery and the secession of the southern states in the Civil War, standing up against public opinion. Of course, we must both remember the good and bad of everything. Sam Houston was a complicated man, living in a complicated state in a complicated country. I think we have to see both the execution chambers and the universities of this country, for neither discredits the other. But when I look at this statue of Sam Houston and I watch these fireworks on the 4th of July, I can't help but feel that in the end, the good tends to outweigh the bad. But maybe that's just how I'm choosing to see it. Anyway, I'll see you next time.